Hey everyone, it's been a while. I've been super busy with vacation and stuff like that, but I am back and today we are talking about the Canon 70-200 F2.8 RF lens. Yeah, so I've had the pleasure to be able to utilize this lens for a few different paid gigs now, and I've also just been able to utilize it for fun. I was able to take it backpacking on a 17-mile backpacking trip. So I wanted to share my thoughts on the lens, and hopefully that'll help you make a decision on whether or not this lens is for you. So first off, let's talk about why you might want to pay the premium price on this lens, even if you already have an EF 70-200, and that is because of the size of the lens. So it's actually kind of hard to really get a sense of how big this lens is when you're looking on the internet or if you're looking at YouTube videos of it. But I was really surprised when I actually got this lens to see how small it was. For the first time ever, I was able to fit a 70-200 2.8 lens with an ultra wide angle zoom lens. So I have the 15-35 RF lens along with my Canon R5 in a small f-stop travel bag. So I think it's called the Fitzgerald a bag. I can't remember how many liters it is, but it's not a lot. It's a small bag, and this was easily able to fit into that bag. Having a quality lens like this when you're traveling or doing landscape is it's kind of essential to me. Likewise, it was a pleasure backpacking with this lens because it's not that heavy for a 70-200 2.8 lens. And again, the size really saves space in the bag when you need to bring some other stuff like your camping gear and food and water and stuff like that. So, and anyone who's into backpacking, you guys know how important it is to save on weight with your gear. So it is nice having a relatively light lens to bring with you. So you will notice as I hold this lens up that I did take the collar of the lens off, and I also took the hood off, because if you add that stuff on, it really makes it a lot bulkier. I do wish the lens hood was a little bit more compact, but it's not too big of a deal for me not to have the hood because this lens does a good job with flare resistance. In terms of things like ghosting and decreased contrast, you don't really have to worry about that stuff too much. So I felt comfortable not bringing the lens hood with me. Now, in some of these landscape pictures that I'm putting up right now, you'll notice that the flare is kind of noticeable. It has a noticeable characteristic to it, but that's actually not representative to the type of flare that you'd get in the lens. My front element actually had fingerprints on it, so that smudging on the lens kind of leads to more noticeable characteristics of the flare that you see in the photos. Otherwise, this lens definitely does really well in backlit situations. In terms of image quality, this lens is perfect for me because it's perfect for portraits and perfect for landscape, and I'll tell you why. When you're shooting this lens wide open, it's not so bitingly sharp that it's almost distracting. Like when I shoot with my RF 85mm prime lens, I often find myself having to do a lot of retouching, and I've even had client feedback saying that they kind of wanted to soften up the skin a little bit just because they could see, a lot of pores and just a lot of detail in the skin that you don't necessarily want to see. But with the 70-200, it does soften up just enough where it makes the retouching in post a little bit easier, a little bit faster, so you don't have to worry about that so much. And also, the corners of the image aren't going to be as sharp as you might get in some other competing 70-200 lenses, like with the Nikon 70-200 F2.8. I think it's an S lens, but I don't really care about that because when I'm shooting wide open, I'm usually shooting portraits, and it's just it's not a big deal because that area of the photo is usually out of focus anyways. But what's cool about this lens, and it's different than any other 70-200 zoom lens that I've used before, is that the quality of the out of focus background is really smooth and more reminiscent to what you would see in a prime lens. So that's what was appealing to me with this lens, is that you're not kind of sacrificing that almost like unique character that you would get in a prime lens by having a zoom lens. Now, as you saw in the landscape images that I showed you, the lens still gets sharp when you stop it down. I mean, I would say anything above 3.2, it's just, I don't know why you'd need it any sharper. Just to go over the build quality real quick, it has a really nice premium feel. I love the off-white color that you get with this this lens. You have a lock switch right here in case you want to lock your lens so that the focal length doesn't change. You have a focus limiter right here, which you'll find on other RF lenses too. The autofocus manual focus switch, and then your stabilizer switch right there. And then it is cool that you get 3 different modes of stabilization on the lens too, depending on the type of situation you're in. One thing I did notice when I was utilizing this lens at first was that when I zoomed out to 70-200, the lens became a lot more front heavy. So the shift in weight of the lens took a little bit to get used to, but really not a big deal at all. In terms of performance close up, I think that this lens does well. Again, you might want to stop it down to 3.2 or above if you are taking pictures at the minimum focus distance, just to increase that contrast and sharpness a little bit more. But I do think that this lens has a very usable minimum focus distance, and it just makes it that much more versatile, and you really can go into a session and probably do the majority of a portrait session with just this lens. The autofocus speed is awesome when paired with the Canon R5 and you know, R6. I used to have the R6, and they both use the same autofocus systems. I had a chance to utilize this lens for a little bit of wildlife photography, and it definitely does really well in a lot of situations. I would say in scenarios where you don't have as much ambient light available, you might struggle a little bit with the autofocus, but it really depends on a lot of different factors. So this RF lens specifically has dual nano USM autofocus motors. I'm guessing that Canon went with the dual nano USM autofocus system because there is a lot of heavy glass in here, but they still wanted the autofocus to be really quiet for video too. And that brings me to my next point, and that is that the 70-200 is awesome for video. So you know, focus breathing really isn't a problem in this lens. The autofocus is silent, really fast. The image stabilization is absolutely amazing. If you haven't seen my first video on this lens, I did include a short social media video that I posted, and that was all shot handheld, so I'll link that above if you want to check that out. And you can get stable footage even if you're hand holding this lens, even at 200 millimeters. And that just goes to show how awesome Canon's image stabilization is. I do hope that they fix the image stabilization issues at the wider end, like 15 to 35 millimeters. But anything beyond 35, then you're getting really, really awesome image stabilization. And I think it's cool that they did put that control ring on these lenses because, you know, I mean, Nikon has, what do they have on their lenses? It's like a digital info screen, and I don't think that's super practical and really functional. So I would much rather have another method of control. That's it for this video. If you guys have any questions about this lens, definitely let me know in the comments section below, and I will see you in the next one.